Most people may have read or heard that I had an injury last year at the start of the year. In this video, I want to explain kind of in depth how I reacted to that, why it happened, and what exactly it was. It was a pretty hard time for me, and it was quite challenging to recover in time for Kona in October. At the start of the year, I was quite stressed out, and I think there's some really good learnings for people going through injuries, but also to maybe pull yourself up before getting one. So yeah, hopefully this can help people a little bit. I found it really hard, so that's probably why I didn't talk too much about it in actually when it was happening. So what actually happened was 2017 Kona, when I had a really good result, but I actually crashed on the bike, and so it was probably at about the 60-70k mark of the bike. I was taking a drink and kind of got blown off. I got back up and continued, and everything went really swimmingly. But I didn't actually, after the race, ever have a check-in with my body to see if everything was okay. Then I took this strange elongated break where we raced a little bit, and I probably didn't recover from Kona before doing Noosa, but it was my own desire to do Noosa and to do the Island House that kept me going through that period. Obviously travelled to America to go to the Bahamas, had Thanksgiving in the US afterwards, did some track testing in Germany, and then travelled all the way home. And there was quite a lot of travel, and it wasn't a proper break. And then we did take a break after that, but once again, I never actually checked in with my body to see if everything was okay. And then we started back training in December, and it seemed like it was all fine, and I started out as you normally would, and by about maybe 3 to 4 weeks into training, I sort of noticed that my back was getting really sore. I remember it really vividly. I was doing a 2-hour run, and with about maybe 20 minutes to go, I couldn't my back just started feeling like I needed to like curve in and curve out, and it was really awkward. Anyway, I ended up finishing that run, and I went to cross the road, and something just went click in my back, and I knew it was like not good. I still walked home from that run, but I guess it wasn't right, and I kept trying to dig stuff into my back that day, like balls and all sorts of stuff, and trying to click my hip, and I honestly thought it was more like a piriformis injury or something like this. So I had a second run that afternoon, and I remember running and hardly being able to run, not through pain in my hip actually, just through being fatigued, and I sat down and something wasn't right. I was quite upset, but it wasn't like excruciatingly painful. And then perhaps I left it a couple of days. I told my coach, obviously. It came up so quickly, I would have told him in advance had I known it was anything more serious than a bit of a sore or tight back. And then probably maybe halfway through the following week, it was like something was real wrong. I could tell like I wasn't putting weight on my hip properly when I was walking, and I was like, okay, well, this isn't right. So we went and had like a lot of treatment, and I felt a lot better. We noticed that I had a massive leg length discrepancy, and I think that was like an indicator that something wasn't right. And tracing it back, it was all because I'd crashed on the bike, and we hadn't addressed sort of like a tilt in my pelvis at the time. So once we actually corrected this misalignment, it was kind of, I almost didn't feel that much pain anymore. And I actually raced Hell of the West last year with what we found out to be on the Monday after the race, with a really, really big stress fracture in my, probably up maybe this long, I don't know, in my sacrum. And so pretty much from Gundawindi, which is this time last year, it's almost exactly a year ago, for 8 weeks after that, I wasn't able to do any running, which for me is the longest break from running I've had since I was a kid. I'd run long distance up to 30-40 Ks a week from very young, like 12 years old. I used to do early morning running, so it was psychologically part of my identity was a runner. So yeah, it was really tough, not just for me but also for my coach, because he didn't know how to handle non-running Sarah, and neither did I myself. So that was kind of what actually had happened to my back. It was an actual proper crack. It wasn't a stress reaction. So we did actually have to get right off the leg, right off my legs.
I've been working with Sarah for about a year. She came to us just after a lot of travel after Kona 2 years ago with a bit of pain at the back of her right hip. And it turned out, unfortunately, that she had a sacral stress fracture. And these are actually really quite a rare injury that happen over time. They're an accumulation of load. For Sarah, it was on the right side at the back of her sacrum. And the key thing to her is that her hamstring gets really tight. It pulls the pelvis backwards and then it jams up, and yeah, that's what caused that stress fracture. So it's not a sudden fracture, but one that happens over time. Since then, we've been working a lot on Sarah's release strategies, just so she's not fighting her body, so she's not fighting a structure. Initially that was for rehabbing her injury, staying on top of her injury, but now I think Sarah is feeling maybe the benefits of that for her performance as well. And as well as that, she works on a sort of therapeutic exercise program and stuff to sort of complement her training and make sure she doesn't have such a nasty injury again.
Yeah, so Kieran came to Park City with me last year for the period of time between Hamburg, Ironman, when I left Germany, and then prior to Santa Cruz, and we then travelled to Santa Cruz and raced together. But he kept my alignment all sorted during that time. But I think he's a young lad, but he's a smart boy, and I think the best thing about having someone that you see kind of weekly is that you just keep a track of anything. And so if I'm out of balance one week, it gives me something I can sort of work on for the following week. So there's an example there. I had a tight hamstring, so I know I can just roll that out this week, and then I'll see him again next week. And those things are like key, because say for instance my hamstring, that really pulls on the sacrum, and that can kind of contribute to stress in that area. So it's just a massive thing for me. It's a learning curve from last year where I probably didn't have someone weekly or that knew your body that well. On top of that, Kieran works at Body Leadership here, Body Leadership Australia. It's a physio, but I also see a massage therapist once a week as well at No More Knots, and I see a fairly experienced therapist there that works with the AFL football team in Brisbane, and he's pretty onto it as well. So they work really well together, the two. But I do get a lot of treatment now. I think it's really, really important, and it's something I always took for granted. I think as you get older, it's probably more important as well. So I went through everything with a comb. I'm very detailed with my training, and I've never had any sort of stress fracture or almost any running injury in my life. So I was really concerned that something wasn't right. So I went back and checked over everything. We did blood tests. So we found out that my iron was quite low and depleted. So obviously the next step there was to get an iron injection to make sure that was normal and that I was healthy so that I could heal properly. Then also wanted to look at what was going on in my life, and at the time we were doing a fair few renovations in our house, and I couldn't just easily go and relax. We had workmen in and out of the house, so I guess in hindsight I should have probably noticed that a bit more and maybe scheduled those people in and out of the house so that I could get some rest. So that really happened quite quickly. The group changed. I guess we noticed a lot of things that cause psychological stress. The group changed from just me and Josh and a few others to quite a large group, and I didn't know how to deal with that. So I tried to separate myself from everyone because I was so used to being alone, and I think maybe I was a little bit too intense about that, and then maybe it was like something that kind of stressed me out, like trying to manage my time so that I didn't have to train with other people. It's so hard to describe, but perhaps the group, I had lost control of my training environment, and the only way I could control it was to control myself. So that's why I wanted to just train alone and to stay away from everyone rather than just be nice and accept them and be happy that there's actually cool training partners to be a part of. So I found it really difficult to deal with. Now I don't even care. It's so funny. It's so weird that I even felt that way, but it really upset me. Although I didn't want to say it at the time or accept it, is that the year before was such a successful year that I felt a little bit of, not so much pressure, but I put pressure on myself to get back to the level of fitness, and I wanted to enjoy the feeling of being so fit really quite quickly. So I didn't let the training come to me. I chased down the fitness a little bit, and it wasn't a matter of like doing extra training outside of what I was told to do, but it was just pushing that 2 to 5% more, or like just finishing a run a little bit harder than I needed to, or something like that. And now this year I've taken the learnings from that. I'm more happy at training, and I've also just let the fitness come, which is a big lesson I've learned from last year. Something that I guess that's, it's really specific to probably professional athletes. That, if you're you've got endorsements and sponsorships and things like this, and races that you've committed to. And I think that the hardest thing is to being true to yourself and racing for yourself. You do begin to feel as if you have to race because you've said you'll race, and it may not be in the long run the best thing for you. So sometimes, say for Cairns, for me, it was very difficult to say no to Cairns. I love the race, I'd committed to the race, but I wasn't ready to race. Now, it was the hardest decision I'd made, and it was only in the last few minutes that we made the decision after me not recovering very well from training, and it was a very hard choice, and I was in tears. It was a mind fuck for me about what do I say to these people? I want to come, but I can't come because I have to be true to myself. And in the long run, it's better for me to perform at my best at the World Championship. I was very quiet and on the down low all year last year, and I think it's sort of, you go in your shell when you get an injury. You just want to get it sorted, and it's not actually that you don't care. It's just that you end up focusing so heavily on recovery that everything else gets put to the side, and it all just becomes about how you just have to follow the most, critical path to getting yourself as fit as possible. So one thing that we've always focused on is like what energy that you take out of your life and your day-to-day life, and what you absorb in terms of stress, and what impact that has later on in the track. And it's something that I always I thought Cam was just sort of rabbiting on about it. I didn't quite understand what he meant, and I really learnt it last year when I was actually faced with this. But basically, when I was having all these stresses on my life, they were having an impact on my ability to drive myself and have desire to win later on in the year when it mattered. By Kona, I was like feeling physically really excited about racing because I hadn't done as much racing as everyone else. My season started later because of the injury. However, I don't think psychologically, I think I was even more exhausted than you would ever expect. And everything that Cam had said about every little bit of energy you need to not sweat the small stuff, because when you're fighting for it in the energy lab or at the end of, in the end of the Queen K, and you're coming in and this was happening. I mean, I was in, say, third place for quite a while on the marathon this year at Kona, and I struggled with the fight at the end of the race because I'd used up so much mental energy and exhaustion during the year trying to overcome all these other obstacles, which all came back to pressure that I'd put on myself and these things that had sort of boiled up at the start of the year, resulting in the stress fracture, and then I guess the training back into it. So yeah, I guess it was very challenging to manage all of that, and I've learned, I think I go out of last year and I feel like I've learned so much. You always want to progress each year, and I feel like last year maybe I progressed in the swim a little bit, and by the end of the year at South America we were killing the run after the really solid bike. But the biggest thing I take away from last year is the mental gains that I made. I learned a lot about myself. Cam learned a lot about me. I learned how to manage all these things. I learned to focus on myself, which is such an easy thing to say, but to really understand what that means is like a learning experience. And perhaps you need to go through something like this to be able to come out the other side knowing more about yourself, to be able to deal with it. I know not to sweat the small stuff. I can laugh things off now, that I don't have to finish every single session perfectly, and I'm just a bit more relaxed. And I think, yeah, it's good for coming into a new year, and I think it's helped me this year already start the year with just a little bit more of a different perspective, and just really excited to race and to get after some more training. And I've rejuvenated my love for triathlon again, even though it doesn't, I mean, from the outside you wouldn't even know that I ever felt that way, but I really respect my group, my training partners now, and I respect Cam for having dealt with me last year, and I really look forward to this year and what we can achieve with just a more positive mindset and it's like a different outlook. And looking forward to Kona 19.